The Emajõe-Peipsi barge. The Emajõe-Peipsi barge is a unique wooden trading vessel. In Estonia, Peipsi barges sailed the inland waters for more than 600 years, from the 14th until the middle of the 20th century, thus contributing greatly to the prosperity of several Estonian towns, and especially to Tartu. When the Hanseatic League dominated trade across the Baltic and North Seas, Peipsi barges heading for Novgorod carried mainly salt, cloth, beer, sweet wine and oriental spices. On the return, they brought furs, honey and wax. The 19th century was the prime time for Peipsi barges, when there were more than 500 on Lake Peipsi. At that time, around 200 barges could often be seen anchored in Tartu port. The townspeople needed firewood and foodstuffs. Coach horses needed hay. In the centre of Tartu, right next to the river Emajo, were separate markets for wood, hay and fish. The leisure time of the barge merchants was spent happily listening to a concertina or partying in the numerous city taverns. Most of the sailing barges were lost in the turmoils of the two world wars, when they were requisitioned as efficient military landing ships. The last of them could be seen sailing on Lake Peipsi in the middle of the 20th century. By this time, the magnificent square sails had been removed and they were being towed by engine-powered vessels. The construction of a Peipsi barge. The archaic building methods, dating back to the time of the Hanseatic trading ship Koge, changed little over the centuries. Clinker planking was crucial. It is the technique of strengthening the hull with strips of wood attached with metal clamps, as was a huge square sail. That did not change over 600 years. The unusually round and flat-bottomed hull of Peipsi barges made it perfect for navigation in the shallow waters of the Emajo River and in Lake Peipsi. It could also land in the rather challenging port locations characteristic of the region. Peipsi barges were usually 12 to 25 metres in length, but occasionally giants up to 35 metres long were built. The storage space of a Peipsi barge was quite large and took in huge quantities of merchandise, whereas the crew was very small. Usually the crew consisted of just 3 people, whose quarters were in the stern and to the fore of the barge. Barges moved with the help of a large square sail. When there was no wind, the boat stood anchored to await more favourable weather. In urgent cases, the barges were towed from the riverbanks with long cotton ropes. The rebirth of a Peipsi barge. In 2004, people interested in the rebirth of this ancient vessel set up the Emajo River Barge Society with the goal of rediscovering the lost art of barge building. They would reconstruct an authentic Emajõe-Peipsi barge according to the old techniques. The idea was supported by the European Union, Tartu City Council, Tele2 and the State Forest Management Centre. The task was complicated. None of the shipbuilders on this side of Lake Peipsi or on the Russian side were still alive. Also, it was discovered that not much written evidence could be found on the technology of building such a vessel. The construction works were started from scratch, and success was achieved by a mixture of cumbersome trial and error and consulting a lot of present-day ship engineers. Luckily, the Estonian National Museum archives contain some drawings of a Peipsi barge and of photos taken at the beginning of the 20th century. The Estonian Naval Museum had some pretty precise models of the barge as well. All the vital tools and construction frames for this work were built in the Emajo River Barge Hall. The craftsmen made multi-corded rope of linen and used traditional pedal-operated gadgets to make round pins for fixing the boards, which they then cut and steam bent. Forging the nails and the clamps followed this. 150 volunteers lent a helping hand to build the barge. On the 29th of April 2006, the only new river barge in the world, it was called Emajo, was successfully launched on the River Emajo. This was observed by thousands of curious onlookers. The hearts of all involved beat anxiously. The name Jõmu was chosen by Estonia's most famous writer Jan Kross, who was an honorary member of the Barge Society. 600 names had been submitted to the selection contest. Jõmu is 12 metres long, with a width of 7.5 metres, and it weighs 20 tonnes. The minimum depth of water it needs for sailing is only 80 centimetres. The mast reaches up to 14 metres above the water level, and the sails cover 100 square metres. As a concession to modern times, the barge is equipped with a quiet and environmentally friendly diesel engine of only 95 horsepower. The barge routes. Looking around the barge, everyone will admire the handiwork of its craftsmen and will feel the breath of times long past and the call of faraway places. The total reach of the barge is over 600 kilometres, across Lake Peipsi and across Lake Votsjev and on the great and small Emajoe River. The home port of Jõmu is in Tartu, in the small barge yard. The barge takes travellers on a short river trip, or on longer trips lasting for several days through the wild nature and amidst exciting cultures. You can discover the floodplains of Alampedia and the mystical Emajoe-Peipsi, relax on the wide waters of Lake Peipsi. You can also have a look at everyday life of the traditional folk living on the coastal areas. These are the Russian Orthodox or the Setu people. Hopefully Jõmu will soon be able to visit the eastern coast of Lake Peipsi, the once famous barge building centre Polipe, and a large barge port in Pskov. Being in Russia, all these places are for now inaccessible. Jõmu is at the same time both archaic and modern. The ship that was built following the medieval plans benefits from modern presentational techniques, and also from an electrical power supply and a navigation system, and from the mobile internet solutions Kur and Wi-Fi. A barge with such facilities is excellent for organising seminars and meetings. All barge fans can share the sensation of a great barge adventure via the webcam in the top of the mast. The barge is an environmentally friendly vessel, both in its nature and in its behaviour, and it has been awarded with the appropriate international standard, the Blue Flag. Cruises on the barge. Cruises on the barge are excellent for observing nature in areas that are inaccessible on foot. In spring there's a superb view from the deck of the barge, over the flooded water meadows and of migrating birds bustling around. On the river bank, cherry trees are in blossom and nightingales are singing. In autumn, barge travellers are attracted to Sursur by mossy ground painted red by thousands of cranberries. Guided by experts, both children and adults discover the world of river dwellers using scoop nets and microscopes, or they use a telescope to explore the boundless universe during autumn nights. They can also use a listening device to hear bats catching insects in the summer. Other possibilities are getting to know the River Emajoe and its fish, or taking fabulous photos of the nature early in the morning. The barge and festivals. One could not imagine the greatest summer events in Tartu, the Hanseatic Days in July and the Emajoe Festival in August, taking place without the barge and its cruises. Additionally, in summer, Jõmu visits the seaport villages of Peipsi, Votsjev and Emajoe, showing films to villagers in its spacious cargo hold and on its great sail. Jõmu joins in outdoor plays in summer and carries musicians on board. During the spring and autumn student days, the barge is transformed into a cinema, where fans can see a wide variety of films. During festivals, the barge is accompanied by a sailing barge yard, as it's called. In other words, workshops on water, where everyone can try modelling little barges or hearing about the secrets of blacksmithing or about wood carving and learn to make knots, ropes and tar. The future. The Emajoe Barge Society is engaged in studying the history of shipping on Estonian rivers and lakes. It wishes to restore and maintain all types of local ships and to teach the skills of making such vessels. In May 2008, the building of an 11-metre-long Viking ship began in the small barge yard. All who are interested can see how ships were built more than 1,000 years ago. To broaden its range of activity, the Barge Society, in cooperation with the city government of Tartu, plans to establish an all-purpose cultural and leisure centre, e-Peipsi, in the neighbourhood of the small barge yard. This would facilitate rebuilding the two-masted Peipsi barge that has presently been conserved, waiting for the big barge yard to be completed. Other splendid ships that have sailed in larger rivers and lakes in Estonia in the past could then also be rebuilt here.